everybody, and welcome to another episode of Getting Inside the Right Male Mind. When I speak of the right male mind, I mean this one right here. I'm Lisa Shield, and this is my husband, Benjamin Shield. So we have been prepping for today's talk, and it's really been quite fascinating. Benjamin has a lot to say on the subject of men and children.
It's a very sensitive issue.
Yeah.
Because there are so many feelings about not having kids and also wanting to have kids and also about having kids. I remember my best friend years ago said, Benjamin, as hard as it is, people say it is to have children, multiply that by 100. And I sat up and said, wow, what a statement. And then he said, but as good as people say it is, multiply that by 1,000. So I thought that was an extraordinary statement, and clearly that one would never have the experience and the range of emotion without having kids. So we're going to delve into the reasons that men may want to have kids, but also the reasons men may not want to have kids. And one of the reasons we're bringing this up is that in our groups, we have many women who are in their 40s who are still thinking about having kids.
They may have frozen their eggs.
They may have frozen their eggs, and it's on their mind every day. So we wanted to bring up the male point of view to kind of just bring some clarity and perspective to the subject.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to move your mic up, babe. And make sure that we get you, because sometimes you have a softer voice, deep and masculine, but softer. All right. So first, I'll start out by saying that one of the things that brought Benjamin and me together was the fact that neither one of us wanted children.
Or had kids.
Yeah. We both didn't have them. And Benjamin was willing to date a woman who had grown kids who were out of the house, but he didn't want to be raising kids, parenting kids. He wanted that to be not part of the equation.
Right. And I had thought about having kids every single day of my adult life. And sometimes when I leaned towards having kids, I wasn't with the right woman. And sometimes when I was with the right woman, they didn't want to have kids. So it never quite meshed.
Yeah, but you also said to me that it really ultimately was and is your preference not to have had them.
Yes, I never had the strong desire that some men have.
Yeah, and I never had the strong desire that women have. In fact, one time I watched Game of Thrones, and they were going to, when Cersei, the queen's husband, died, her father was going to marry her off to another man. And I thought, God, I was born in the right day and age for me, because that would have been horrible. There she was, the queen, and she was going to be married off to a man. We talked earlier about how you and I actually had a choice in the matter.
Yes.
There was a time, if you really think about this in history, where people didn't really have a choice whether or not they had to have children, right?
Right. And even, the birth control methods that were used then were anything but foolproof.
Yeah.
My parents, who are Jewish, or, they've passed on, they practiced the, I think it's referred to as a Catholic method of, timing the
monthly periods and
exactly
stuff.
with the intimacy. And there's the joke, what do you call people that practice the Catholic calendar method? You call them parents.
Yeah, there's also the joke about when you would see women jumping off the steps at their homes because they were pregnant and they didn't want to have babies.
Well, that wouldn't be the joke, but that would be.
Well, yeah, it was sad, but you would see them and people would go, uh-oh. Yeah. So there was a time, if you really go back, not that long ago, my mother's generation, and you think about the fact that there was no birth control or abortion, and if two people were attracted to each other, I know when I was growing up, it would have disgraced my parents if I had gotten pregnant out of wedlock, disgraced them. It would not have been accepted. And I'm 60 years old. Today, there's, I don't know, 40%, I believe, of all babies are born out of wedlock. So it's skyrocketed since, the 1960s, where I think it was like somewhere between 4 and 10%. I don't know the exact figures, but it's just skyrocketed. And when I talk to women, I will often say, have you ever been married? And they will say no. But then I ask also, do you have children? Which is a question that we wouldn't have even assumed to have asked a while ago. And a stunning number of the women I speak to have children and were never married. So that would not have been accepted by my parents. I'm glad it is today, because women shouldn't have to be married in order to have children, and there shouldn't be any stigma attached to that. So I want to make that very, very clear. But when I was growing up, it wasn't acceptable. And I came of age right around the time when the birth control pill was legalized and when abortion was legalized. So you and I grew up in a different day and age, and we had this choice. If two people had been wildly attracted to each other, they would have very easily wound up in bed together. Avoiding sex was, as we all know, is a very hard thing to do, because hormones, Mother Nature designed us to procreate. Yeah, it is what it is, but we were really lucky. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's look at some of the reasons men want children.
Well, I actually wanted to start somewhere else, babe. I want to start first with talking about the burning question for all the women out there who want children and have a burning desire to be a mother. What is it like for a man in the dating world knowing that almost any single woman you meet who is of childbearing age and doesn't have children probably wants a father for her kids?
Well, I think a lot of men, they're hoping for the ambivalence of the woman, the eventual ambivalence that they may consider not having kids. If the man doesn't want to have kids, they may be very afraid of being trapped into a relationship, into a marriage, into a family that they really hadn't planned on. And if there's an accidental or an intentional pregnancy, then a man can feel trapped. So he could be very wary dating, particularly someone who is hearing the biological clock and the ticking is getting louder.
Yeah. And so they can be wary, especially for, I'm guessing there's like two different camps. There's older men who already have had children and are dating and concerned that even they may meet a woman who's in her late 30s or early 40s who says, no, I know I'm past that point, but once the relationship starts to blossom, she may turn around and say, I'd really like to try to have a child with you.
Yeah. And the guy has already gone through raising kids, getting through school and paying for college, perhaps, and just really wants time with someone, wants time to travel and not be anchored to the household into taking care of kids.
Yeah. And what about some men, like my own father, did wind up having another child in his 50s. I have a sister who's in her early 20s, and I'm 60.
A half sister, huh?
Yeah, I have a half sister. So my father did do it again. What makes a man decide after he has grown adult children, when he's almost could be a grandfather, to have another child?
I think partly it's a sign of masculinity, that he could father a child. I think it's also solidifying a relationship with a wife, particularly a younger wife. I think that if mistakes were made with the first children, that he has another chance to do it right.
Yeah. Yep. And probably because his wife was so much younger than him, he must have known that she would want to be a mother. That she, when he got into that relationship, he knew, and he married her. So he knew that she was going to want kids because she's actually 10 years younger than me.
Yeah.
So she was, I think, she would have been 19, I think, when they met, something like that. So he knew that she would have probably wanted to be a mother.
Yeah.
He knew what he was signing up for. Wow. Well, so I'm curious for you, or for any man who's out dating. And there you are, either you're a young man building your future, or you're a more established man who might be in his late 40s or 50s. But this is really, I'm thinking it's almost like running a gauntlet. Like, that every woman you meet, pretty much, I'm something of a rare exception. Many of my girlfriends don't have kids, but they wanted them. I don't talk to very many women who are just absolutely crystal clear like me that they did not want to be mothers. So the vast majority of women out in the dating world want to be mothers. What is that like for a man who's dating, who's horny, who wants to have sex, who, could also get entrapped? I mean, it must be daunting. I don't know. It must be kind of nerve-wracking for a guy out there.
Well, you never know in the courtship if they're courting a potential life partner or solely courting a father for their child.
You mean if the woman is looking for that?
Yeah. So a man is wary and uncertain because a woman may be uncertain. I think biology is so powerful that a woman may not even know that she is looking for, more a father for the kids than really sizing a man up to see if this is a suitable person to spend the rest of her life with. And a lot of mistakes have been made.
Yeah. And I know a lot of women who say, I'm really past childbearing years and I don't think I can have a child. But then once they fall in love and they feel like this man is in love with them, then suddenly they start thinking, well, why not try to have a child? Why not? Because they're, in that limerence phase of the relationship, they're all, glowing and feeling love. And they start to think, well, if he loves me, surely he'll want to have a baby with me. And I think those are some of the fantasies that women operate under. They just think, oh, if he loves me, he'll do this for me.
Yeah. And it's like Marianne Williamson had described, some people have a picture frame, what something will look like. And they're just waiting to put a picture in it, of a guy, of kids and all that. But they already have that fantasy, which is the picture frame. I think some men are wary that they're just looking for a particular picture to stick in that frame, and that picture would be them.
I can't even imagine. I know of one man that I knew quite a long time ago. He had a child, and he had a child from a woman he had a one-night stand with. And she kept the child, and it turned out that she was a drug addict, and she had all kinds of psychological problems going on. And he was literally bound to that woman and that child because he was a good man. His life was intertwined with hers, and it was very, very difficult for him. I mean, you even said earlier when we were talking that if you got a woman pregnant, if she wanted to get married, you would have married her for the child.
Oh, yeah, I would have done it for the child. Absolutely.
Yeah, but then you're locked into a marriage with somebody that you may or may not love. And at least for 18 years of that child's life, you're there. Someone like you, I know your ethics. I mean, it would have been hard for you, even if the marriage was terrible, to leave, you would have done everything in your power to make it work at your own expense.
Yeah.
Do you think a lot of men do that?
I don't know. I truly don't know. And it may even depend on religious values. It may depend on geographical values. It may depend on the family values that they grew up with. So it would be hard for me to generalize.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
And what about if you were dating someone, honey, and, you know, let's say you broke up and then she came back and said she was pregnant. How would you feel?
Well, I've actually heard that people have breakup sex and they break up and there's a pregnancy. And I think people just try to make it fit. They just try to make it work. You know, if the woman decides to keep the child, and it's really in the woman's power to keep it or not to keep it, that a good man would do whatever he could to make it work.
But deep down, how would you feel in that situation?
I think part of me would feel resentful. Part of me would feel ideally a bit hopeful that things could work out now that there's, you know, it's a family. But I don't think it often does work out. I think that not only the man might have resentment towards the woman, but also towards the child, because it interferes with so much of his existing life.
Right.
There's so many changes.
And also, I could only imagine that a man would feel disempowered. It's like having your freedom of choice taken away. I mean, you have to do the right thing. You participated in creating this life, and morally, ethically, you would do I think certain men would do the honorable thing, but even putting all of that aside, it would feel devastating mentally, emotionally, spiritually for a man, because he would have no say-so. It would be up to the woman. It would be her choice.
Now, some men from an early age really want kids. They want a family. You know, they may have grown up in a family with a lot of kids. They may have had a very happy childhood. They may have just have the drive to be a father, to mentor a child, to recapitulate his own childhood that may not have been pleasant, that he makes a vow to himself that his child would grow up better than he did. You know, we accumulate things. You know, I have a pipe collection. You know, just to have someone to leave something to, or to pass on the name. You know,
The legacy.
yeah. I mean, because my brother doesn't have kids, for the most part, our last name will disappear with us. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, this will be the end of the line.
Yeah.
Wow. So, and also parental pressure. You know, there's pressure from parents
Right.
to have kids and grandkids.
They want grandkids.
Almost an obligation. You know, there can almost be a sense of obligation. Your parents gave you life. They brought you into the world, and they want grandkids. You know, and there's a feeling of obligation to give them kids.
Yeah.
I know women really feel that. They really feel that from their mothers.
Oh, yeah. Because I've been told that being grandparents is kind of the reward for having raised the kids of their own.
Yeah. Another reason why men would have children is to experience that side of them that is a father. You know, you don't get to have the paternal experience unless you would have been an amazing father. You would have been such a wonderful dad.
I would have been a great father, but it would have been at a great expense. I mean, some of the things that I cherish is after a full day treating clients, which might be an 11-hour day, having that time in the evening to let the day catch up with me and for me to catch up with the day, to have quiet time to kind of integrate and not hear stories, just relax with my wife. That is precious. I love quiet Sundays, you know, and people say, well, those are the first things that are going to go.
Right.
I cherish sleep, particularly as I get older. Sleep has been very important to me. And we have a dog that's 14 and a half, and he has an old man's bladder, and it's getting up maybe 3 times a night with him, and then time to fall back to sleep, that it's cut into my sleep. And I could only imagine having a newborn.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. I couldn't even imagine
Yeah.
doing that, as you get into your 60s or 70s, 50s.
Yeah. And I know people make it work.
Yeah.
When we met, and until we moved to Santa Fe, I had a practice that was morning to night, 5 days a week, and then some administrative things even beyond that. And I couldn't imagine fitting in being a father, which would take precedent over my career.
Right.
Where it would all fit in.
Yeah.
And what would suffer? Would my ability to be a good father suffer, or would my ability to have a career that I've worked hard to establish and maintain, to suffer? And I know people make it work.
Yeah.
They just make it work. Even people that say, well, it's never a good time to have a dog. I can't imagine, taking care of a dog, and they make it work. And a child would be, 1,000 times more. But they make it work.
Yeah. So I think it's really important to consider for a lot of the women out there, if they're dating and you've got women who are anywhere from 29 to 40 in that age range, a 29-year-old is going to be entering her 30s, but all the way through those years, she's dating, she's probably, she may have a wonderful career, but she's also really looking for a father. Every date she goes on, every man she sits across from, somewhere in the back of her mind, she's asking herself, is this the father of my children?
And she hopes the child would have her nose rather than his nose.
Unless you're Barbara Streisand. Honey, so what would you, for a man, that's got to be awful, like knowing that women are sitting across from you wondering if you're going to be, their baby daddy.
Yeah. And I know some guys, past clients, who are CADs, who, may have had vasectomies, who will even talk about being willing to have kids.
Whoa.
Just to draw a woman in, because the woman will think, oh, finally, a guy that's interested in talking about it, where they have no interest at all. So I've heard those stories also.
Like and these guys are in their 50s or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we know guys who, love bombers or avoidants who get very excited when they meet women. And these are fabulous women.
Yeah.
I can think of a couple in particular who stand out for both of us, but would date some very attractive younger women. And the saddest thing was that, they'd get into it and maybe they even really wanted to make it work and they couldn't help themselves, but they wasted a good chunk of these women's time, their childbearing years, even if it was a year or it was 2 years of that time. And the women thought that they were interested, there was a future, that it was going to go somewhere. And then, at the 11th hour, they'd pull out, they couldn't do it. Yeah, it was devastating. And these could have been, the years from, 36 to 38.
Yeah.
Very, very pivotal years when a woman would be wanting to truly find her guy. And these guys let him on. And it wasn't maybe even intentional on their part, because what happens sometimes with intimacy issues is that these men are actually wanting partnerships. They keep seeking it over and over and over again, but somehow they keep finding something wrong with every single woman. Yeah. So, but it's devastating. It's devastating. But how do women handle this? Like, what advice do you have for these women who are, in their late 20s to late 30s who really want to have babies who are out in the dating world.
Well, for the women in our groups, I write the profiles because I know what a man would like to read in a profile and what would maybe turn a man off. So I write the profiles, and they've been very successful. But if I know that a woman wants a husband rather than a life partner, and if I know a woman wants children, I will say that up front, and I will repeat it in the profile, just so a woman doesn't waste time hoping that a great guy might change his mind and want kids. That we want to filter those guys out that absolutely don't want kids. And if they see a woman that wants marriage and wants children, family-oriented, family activities, and if a guy isn't interested, we want to filter those guys out so she doesn't waste those times or possibly get into a relationship for a number of years and have those years wasted. Wasted.
And what does a woman do? Like, what are some of the things that women do that scare men away in this regard? How do we handle this as we're dating a guy? How soon do we talk about it? Do we have to wait a certain amount of time? Should we bring it up right away? What do women do?
My sense, if she's sitting across from a gentleman at Starbucks or wherever it is, and she sees potential in the relationship, it needs to be brought up early, because a relationship can be like a slow-moving train. It can build up momentum, and then it's kind of hard to stop. And so if a guy is ambivalent about having kids, then it can go on for a number of years, and then it could fall apart.
But how many guys really aren't ambivalent about having kids? It's so hard to say, because sometimes a man can change his mind. Just like you didn't want to get remarried, but you made your own choice. You decided to propose to me. And it was, you had written emphatically in your profile that wasn't something you wanted.
Yeah. I mean, a man could change their mind. Absolutely. I think that if they're ambivalent and if they're in a solid relationship, a loving relationship, they tend to lean towards wanting to have kids and family if there was an ambivalence to begin with. But the goal of the profiles and the goal of the early discussions is to filter out those people that may have some ambivalence, because I think most men in the back of their mind think, well, I'd be a great father. It would be interesting to have kids. It'd be great to teach kids and play catch with them and teach them how to fly a kite and all of those things. And that's on a man's mind, even if the majority of their intention is not to have kids. I think there's ambivalence with almost every man. I think that having the discussion early on sets the tone of the relationship.
But how early? Because I really do feel that if it's done too early, it's like you're checking off boxes, and many men are going to feel concerned, especially with women who are a bit older, like 38, 39, 40. They're going to get very concerned if that comes up too quickly.
Well, I think that if someone is in their late 30s and the discussion even on the first date comes up as, what are you looking for? I think there needs to be an honesty about it. So my sense is that having that discussion early on, it certainly may turn off a great many men and maybe a lot of good men. But ultimately, we want someone who's on the same page. And so I'm all in favor of early on in the profile, which is even before the first date, maybe even the Zoom calls, but definitely in person. And particularly if someone asks, well, what are you looking for? Because some people are looking for just a life partner. They're not looking to get married. Some people don't want kids. But if it is really important to have a life that feels fulfilled, to have kids, then it needs to be brought up early.
But I also think that it's how you bring it up.
Absolutely.
I think that it's not just bringing it up, but it's bringing it up in a way that is an invitation or sounds very inviting to a man, rather than, oh, you don't want kids? And then the woman has an attitude, why am I wasting my time here? Right? But more of a, I'm really looking for a wonderful partner, first and foremost. I want to find a man that I share a beautiful relationship with, a lovely, wonderful, deep emotional connection. And that would be the first thing. And then beyond that, my greatest dream, my desire, if I meet someone in time who shares my same values, my greatest wish would be then to have at least one child with him.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, as you say, it's about sharing a dream rather than a checklist.
Right. And it's how you say it. It's making it an invitation and being able to do that without desperation, without sounding like you have this big agenda. But the more sort of fluid and inviting you can be with that conversation, the better. Because then a man doesn't feel like you're just imposing, like, if you're going to be with me, this is how it is.
Right.
Right.
And I think it's also important for the man to know that even if both want kids, that they will have enough time just with the two of them before they have kids. Because when a child happens, when a baby happens, there's a picture of the three of them, equally co-parenting and all that. But the truth is that the mother becomes so bonded with the child that the man recedes into the background a bit. So what was the most important thing, in the woman's life, the relationship with the guy, now he's kind of on the sidelines, and he might resent having had a child or the child itself.
And what it takes away from him.
What it takes away from him.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah. And it's important for women to know that, like, to understand that they need to keep that bond with the husband alive and the connection and make him feel like a priority and not like he's constantly being pushed aside for the child.
Yeah. And not even after the fact, but to have that discussion even before pregnancy. That the woman knows that both people who have their eyes wide open know that this can happen, and the woman will do everything she can to maintain the intimate relationship that they had going into the pregnancy.
And I think it's really important for women to hear that they are conscious of this, because men rely on us for so much intimacy and emotional support. And if that's cut off, that's devastating, because that's really, beyond sex. That's really what men come to us for, is for that nurturing, supportive, emotionally supportive connection that they get with us.
And now it's really focused towards the infant. Yeah.
Interesting. And you made, we were talking about the reasons you and I chose not to have kids. And I think one comment that you made before we started talking was that most psychotherapy sessions deal with the mother-father, the child-parent relationship.
Yeah, when you think of psychotherapy, when you think of someone laying on a couch or just meeting with a regular therapist, it's often about going through the childhood wounds and trying to heal the childhood wounds. And you, I, and almost everyone listening to this podcast, this broadcast, have experienced childhood wounds that they're still dealing with, that may have defined the relationships of their lives because of what happened in childhood.
Yeah. So that speaks to the fact that statistics show that most couples who don't have children tend to be rank happier than couples who have children.
Yeah. And in no way are we saying that people that have children aren't happy or don't have happy relationships.
No, but childless couples across the board are happier. And as you said, a parent is only as happy as his least happy child.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're so bonded to that child. And if he's being...
And responsible.
So if the child is being bullied or having, issues at school or with a boyfriend or a girlfriend.
Or may have made a wrong turn in life.
Yeah, it's devastating.
Yeah.
That's your child.
Yeah.
Your child. So, yeah. So, babe, why did you just, what made you not want to have kids?
Well, I was happy with my life the way it is. And I wanted to focus on a beautiful relationship with a wonderful woman. For me, that was enough. And I knew that I would gain so much by being a father, that I'd be a great dad, and it would have been at an expense. And I don't know if in balance it would have been worth it to me, even though I could see being a father and I could see mentoring a child and playing catch and teaching him some of the wisdom that, like we accumulate that we want to pass on, that, we just don't want it to perish when we perish. So all of those things were on the plus side. And I have such deep satisfaction with our relationship, which is really the relationship of my dreams. That we wake up, we have time together, we have quiet moments together. We have our rituals, like in the evening when we have time to watch TV, you will lay with your head on my lap and I will be stroking your hair until you fall asleep. And we have to see every TV program 2 or 3 times because I never know when you fall asleep. And for us, it's enough. And for other people, it may never be enough until they have kids. And I won't even call it selfish because there's a negative connotation, but knowing that sleep and career and quiet time and time with you are so important
and so fulfilling.
Yeah. And we have dogs.
Right. And we get a lot of amusement and love and pleasure just from being around the dogs.
Yeah.
And it does feel like a family.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think in the back of my mind, my concern about being a father is that I may not have the emotional strength. Like if a child is emotionally hurting, if there's a situation that I can't help the child, that the child goes through a natural process of individuation, in the teens, even in the preteens, where they start, like separating from the parents. And I know so many of my adult friends who, if I ask them, did you ever tell your parents I hate you or think those words? And they say, oh, of course, and to go through all of that, all that goes into nurturing a newborn and going through all the stages and helping them through school and upsets and all that, to have it kind of turned upside down, it would be heartbreaking. So a lot of people do it with tremendous grace. And I may have been able to do it with grace, but I don't know. And I would question whether I would have been able to.
Oh, I think you would have. I think you would have. You have this natural instinct for navigating life where you always know the right thing to do.
Thank you.
So I think the only thing that's sad or that's lost in all of this is just what an incredible father you would have been, because there's been moments in my life where I've come to you for advice. And while you would never try to parent me, there were times where you advised me the way a father would, with the wisdom and knowing that a father would impart to a child.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a good father. I didn't have a good relationship with my father. And so I remember there were times where I just felt overwhelmed by how beautiful it was, to experience what it would have been like to have had a good father. Yeah, you would have been amazing. And the other thing, I don't know, most people listening don't know, is that you treat newborns to age 2, and you are literally a baby whisperer.
Right.
So my husband does a kind of physical therapy, and part of what he does is he sort of inspects the structure. How would you say?
Evaluate and treat.
Evaluate and treat.
And I say that not every child needs to be treated, but every child should have the benefit of evaluation. Mm-hmm. And, I also say there's the expression, as the twig is bent, so grows the tree. So if you can get something early on. So this is what I've done for January will be 40 years. And I've taught for well over 25 years, throughout the world, and written papers and all that on treating newborns and infants. And at the time, it was a frontier. I kind of didn't invent the field, but really created it in my own vision and passed that along. So I love kids. I love babies. I love kids. And I love my quiet time.
But also, just to make it clear for people who are listening, when Benjamin says evaluate during the birth process, if a baby is born vaginally, but especially if there's a cesarean, the structure, the bone structure of the child and different parts, can be out of alignment. And so Benjamin literally evaluates everything about the child to make sure that the child is in good health, that this bone structure is all sound.
And emotional structure, because we're all born leaning towards, if it were a difficult birth, and sometimes what appears as an easy birth from the outside in isn't to the child, and what appears a difficult birth isn't necessarily difficult for the child. But we want to make sure that they're not born with a certain set point of fight or flight, or what's called parasympathetic withdrawal, freezing, when they experience intense emotion. Yeah, all of that's important and very, very satisfying. And I think that I'm able to satisfy my love of infants and children in my work.
Right. Yeah. So I have no affinity for kids at all whatsoever. And I start to connect with them somewhere around the teenage year.
where you could go shopping with them.
Yeah. Like once they become even more so young adults, like I can start relating at around 21 is a good turning point for me. I just literally am not like, I don't look at a baby and go, oh, look at the cute baby, or doesn't elicit any response from me. Nothing. I mean, just nothing. And, I'm sure part of that is just how I'm wired.
Yeah. And I know that if you had a baby, in your younger years, that it would be very different. You would be a very devoted, focused mom.
Oh, I don't know. I was such a wreck when I was a kid. I was like somebody stumbling around in the dark, just looking for the light switch somewhere. I needed my mom, because my mother died when I was 15 and my father was remarried and he was no longer really there for my brother and me. I think that I needed all my resources for myself. And what's wonderful is in our program in Emotionally Naked Dating, this is a 12-week course that I teach for women who want to find true love now. They don't want to go another day without love. They're ready to just find their partner. And this really is a beautiful, elegant, step-by-step roadmap for finding true love. Almost every day I get an email from a client who says, Lisa, I think I met the guardian of my soul. And she will start to tell me all the ways that the course helped her find him. So if you've been struggling, if you just want to get this solved, it's a fallacy that we have to sit back and wait for this person, to find us, or for us to just find them, that life circumstances are supposed to bring us together. You can really be proactive about this with the right roadmap and the right tools, and you can find true love.
Yeah.
And having done this for
and family
and children, so you can make that happen now. And many of my clients find their guys in the 3-month course. Some of them it takes about 6 months to a year, but it speeds up the process. And not only that, they tend to find superior partners because they're not just hoping that, two lives will collide and sparks will fly, but they are consciously looking for certain qualities in a partner, and they're choosing their partner. They're bringing many men into their world so that they can actually make a choice rather than just whoever happens to come along next. But where I was going with all of that is that I now have many daughters because the women will say, I feel like you're the mother I never had. So that's such a beautiful thing for me to hear. But I never wanted kids. And I just, I think we'll end with this. Two people ultimately have to align on their goals, their wishes, their values, their dreams, and then decide to co-create a life together, whatever that looks like for you. And what was so wonderful is that both Benjamin and I very clearly stated in our profiles that we didn't want kids. And I hear so many people who don't want kids or do want kids sort of waffling or trying to move that line because friends and family will say, well, you're being too picky or you're eliminating too many people, or, for a woman who wants kids, maybe you should just date guys who already have kids, So their friends and families are telling them to move that line. But the truth is you can only wind up with one person, hopefully. And what brought Benjamin and me together was this very clear, truth for both of us that we didn't want kids. And so that may have eliminated some very good people, but we were willing to do that because this was so important for us.
Yeah. And it was one of the things that brought us together.
But it was a huge deciding factor for you and me not to have kids. And that was one of your criteria. When you put in your search criteria, that was one of the key things that you were searching for.
Yeah. No kids or grown kids.
And I hear grown kids can be more complicated than young kids.
They can. And that's another story.
That's another, whoops. That's another story. But it did help. It was one of the things that helped us find each other and create this beautiful life.
Right. So if people wanted to find out more information.
Yes, you can go to lisashield.com. That's my website. And when you go, you can check out my praise page if you want to hear some live testimonials. I have a lot of videos there of former clients and their success in the course with Benjamin and me guiding them through this process. You can also find the link to watch my free 45-minute presentation. You can also find my podcast. You can find it on anywhere that you get podcasts. So it would be Spotify, Apple, Audible is another place. You want to look for Dating Without Drama. We do 2 episodes a week. So please enjoy both episodes. One is with just me. The other is Getting Inside the Right Male Mind with Benjamin and me. Oh, and when you're there, please, if you like our podcasts, rate them and comment, please, because it helps us build our audience. Also, tell your sons, your fathers, your boyfriends, your husbands about this particular broadcast or podcast, because I don't think there's another man who is as heartfelt and masculine at the same time as my husband, and one who can so beautifully articulate so much of what men experience. So please, please tell the men in your life. And finally, if you have any suggestions, any topics that you would love for us to cover on future podcasts, please send them. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Lisa Shield.
I'm Benjamin Shield.
And enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.